G'day guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be talking again about oil catch cans, specifically the Provent 200 unit that I have installed in my 200 series Landcruiser. We're going to be seeing how much oil is collected after 7,000 kilometers of driving and compare that with the results from the old HPD unit. We're also going to be doing a bit of a visual oil vapor test from before and after the oil catch can to see whether or not it has been effective. Along with that, we're going to discuss some of the myths associated with crankcase ventilation systems and discuss whether or not it has any effect on an EGR system or an exhaust gas recirculation system. After all this, we're going to discuss whether it's really worth having an oil catch can fitted to your turbo diesel four-wheel drive. So stay tuned, let's get straight into it. So for those of you who have been a part of the channel for a little while, you may recognize this is not the first video I have done on oil catch cans in relation to my Landcruiser 200 series. In my first video, I spoke about and conducted a review on the HPD unit, and my second video, I spoke about why I switched that over to the Provent 200 unit and did a bit of an install for that unit as well. Now, if you're interested in watching either of those two videos, I'll make sure the links are in the description below, and then they can help you out in making a decision about what unit might be appropriate for your vehicle. So before we get into the testing today, we need to understand the purpose of a catch can and what we're hoping to achieve by fitting one. So while the engine is running, there is an immense amount of pressure placed in each cylinder during combustion. This is obviously the sole purpose of an engine, to place pressure to push the piston back down through the cylinder and therefore turn the crankshaft via connecting rods. And this will eventually distribute power through to the wheels. Now, in order to achieve a maximum efficiency and maximum power, there has to be a tight seal in the combustion chamber between the piston head and the cylinder walls. Now, to achieve this, the manufacturers have come up with piston rings, which are essentially thin metal rings that sit within grooves of the head of the piston and therefore try and create that seal between the fast moving metal surfaces. Now, although this provides a great seal within the combustion chamber, we come to expect and we know that some of the gases are forced past those piston rings into the lower half of the engine where the crankcase is. Now, these gases that get past are sometimes referred to as blow-by. Now, as this continues to happen, pressure will build up within the crankcase, and this is where a crankcase ventilation system comes into effect. Now, Toyota, along with all manufacturers, have come up with a crankcase ventilation system to alleviate pressure buildup in that crankcase and prevent engine damage. Now, due to ever-increasing emission standards, these gases just can't be released to the environment as they do contain an oily vapor. Now, in terms of the 200 series Landcruiser, Toyota have mounted a pipe straight from the crankcase ventilation system to the passenger side air intake hose. What this does is it allows the oily gases to be re-injected back into the combustion chamber, allowing them to be processed, burnt, exit through the catalytic converters in an attempt to lower the emissions exiting the vehicle. What this also does, however, is it coats the intercooler and intake pipes with a thin coating of oil. Now, doing so, these oily gases can leave a residue on the intake pipes, the intercooler and the intake system of the vehicle. This can reduce the heat transfer properties of the intercooler and can also attract dirt and contaminants from the EGR system. Now, this system we'll get into a little bit later in the video. However, if you want to see some direct comparison results between the intercooler before and after a clean, you can check out my last video where I measure some of the results from this clean. Now, the purpose of an oil catch can is to, as the name suggests, attempt to catch the oil vapor within those gases while still allowing the crankcase ventilation system to work efficiently and effectively. As mentioned in my last video, I have switched out my HPD unit for the new Provent 200 unit, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a review to seeing how much it catches and how effective it has been over the last few thousand kilometers. So one of the most popular ways to see whether or not a catch can is working efficiently is to see how much oil is collected over a period of time. Now, a couple of videos ago, I did do a HPD catch can review where I did an empty at 8,000 kilometers and measured how much oil came out of the can. And from this measuring jug here, we can see we've got pretty much dead on 75 milliliters there. Now, I've attempted to do the same with the Provent unit here. However, I'll note that about 7,000 kilometers while I was away on a trip, the oil did fill up the hose and start to develop into the plastic body of the unit. This meant that I was forced to empty it out on the trip, out on the road at 7,000 kilometers. So what I've done is I've put that into a bottle, I've sealed it up, brought it home, and now we can put that into a beaker and measure how much is in there. Now, this is one of the great things about the Provent unit. It is quick and easy to drain with the ability to mount the drain hose wherever you like. As shown in my previous video, I have mounted the hose on the inside of the driver's chassis rail. It is as simple as undoing the cap nut and opening the valve, emptying the can and fixing it back up again. So we've had this oil draining for a little while now, and we can see here that the bottle is completely empty. And according to this beaker here, we have just shy of 180 milliliters. So those of you who have watched my previous video in relation to the differences between the HPD can and the Provent 200 unit will know that the Provent 200 runs a paper-styled filter within the can. Now, because that test was conducted with the first 7,000 kilometers of the can being installed, it meant that this paper filter needed to be soaked with the oil vapor before it started liquidizing the oil and therefore catching it in the lower section of the can. So in order to get a true representation about exactly how much it caught in that first 7,000 kilometers, we're going to be chucking both the empty filter and the filter that's in the vehicle onto the scales and converting the difference in grams to milliliters through an oil conversion and trying to get that exact figure about how much oil the catch can caught in that first 7,000 kilometers. So first things first, we're going to measure the empty filter to start with, and we can see there that it was 93 grams. We're then going to remove the dirty filter from the oil catch can, and we can see that we're getting about 120 grams with that one. So if we take our new filter at 93, our old filter at 120, the difference there is 27 grams. Now 1 milliliter of oil approximately weighs 0.947 grams. So if we take our 27 grams, divide that by 0.947, we get there a total of 28.5 milliliters. Now if we add that to our total 180 ml drained from the catch can itself, we're getting a total there of 208.5 milliliters. So there you have it, you've seen the results. The 8,000 kilometer test with the HPD can caught very little when you compare that with the Provent 200 unit. From this unit, we've got a total of 208.5 milliliters of oil, and we can see here that that's much more effective and efficient in removing those oil vapors from that crankcase ventilation system while still maintaining an effective flow of air. So that's our first test complete, and as we can see, the Provent 200 unit has been very effective in collecting that oil vapor from the air and retaining it within the unit. So the next test I want to do is comparing the results of the oil vapor from the inlet and the outlet sides of the catch can. Now I'm sure if you've done any research into oil catch cans, you've probably seen someone take the lid off the catch can and you can see the oil vapor in the air exiting through the top of the can. What most people don't show though is the same sort of test on the outlet pipes of this catch can. Is there any oil vapor visible in the air? And today we're going to be trying to test that out. Now a quick disclaimer, this is no official way of measuring or testing the oil vapor in the air. It's more of a visual representation to see what sort of difference this particular filter is making in this car. So the way in which we're going to be conducting this test today is we're going to be placing a piece of cotton over the inlet and outlet pipe at separate times for various time lengths. I'm going to be using 3 minutes, 2 minutes and 1 minute of the vehicle idling here stationary with the air conditioning off from both the pipe going into the can and the pipe going out of the can. This should leave some sort of oil residue on the cotton, and then we'll be able to compare the difference between before and after the catch can for those time periods. So let's set it up and get this test underway. So in order to complete the first test today, we're going to remove the top hose off the oil catch can. And this top hose is connected directly with the crankcase ventilation system, which means the gases coming out of here are going to be straight from the crankcase. We're then going to lightly place a piece of cotton over the end of that hose and gently secure it down with a hose clamp. Starting the engine will then ventilate those crankcase gases through this top hose up and through the cotton with the attempt to leave some sort of oil residue on that material. We're going to complete the 3 tests, the 3 minute, 2 minute and 1 minute durations, and compare that with our secondary test. So to complete this test, we're going to move to the passenger side of the vehicle. This is where the 2 hoses for the catch can come from the crankcase ventilation system and back into the air intake. We're going to remove the hose that plugs into the air intake, and we're going to get a fresh piece of cotton and place it over the hose extremity to see whether or not it's still picking up any oil vapor after passing through the Provent 200. Now theoretically this should be the cleaner air, it should have little or no oil vapor in it, and that will represent nice fresh air being put back into your intake while still complying with emission standards. So let's get straight into it. So again, just like our first test, we're going to be placing a bit of cotton over the end of an open hose. However, this hose is going to be the lower hose from the catch can. We're going to be running the same 3 tests again with the 3 minute, 2 minute and 1 minute durations. So there we have it, those 3 tests are completed. Now there's one more thing we can do while we have this intake pipe off, is we can just see how much oil is gathered around the intake pipe and where it feeds back in. Obviously a 3, 2 minute and 1 minute test are very short lengths of time, considering we're also idling as well. We're putting these tens of thousands of kilometers on these vehicles in all different types of driving scenarios. So what I'm going to do here is just use the corner piece of this cotton here and wipe around on the inside of this pipe here that leads back into the intake. This will give us a bit of an idea as to whether or not there is still some oil lined within that pipe. Coming back to the bench, we can see our results we've got here. So we can see the before test and the after test, the 3 minute, 2 minute and 1 minute run times. Now from the before test, we can clearly see a black outring, which is the oil vapor being trapped in the cotton fibers, that's still allowing the air to pass. Now we can see even at the 1 minute mark, 60 seconds, we can still see a clear ring of oil vapor that's been collected by this cotton just by placing it over the inlet pipe into the catch can. So we can see here the after test, again the 3, 2 and 1 minute run times. Now you're going to have to excuse the dirt around the testing areas. That was from the clamp and the hoses and was hard to avoid. However, we can see a noticeable difference in the center of those rings in relation to how little oil vapor has been caught by the cotton. So this demonstrates here how the Provent 200 unit is effectively removing these oil vapors and allowing much fresher and cleaner air back into the intake of the engine. So like I mentioned, I also used the corner piece of this after test rag here to wipe on the inside of the pipes to see whether any oil was present. Now on this corner here, you can see a little bit of oil, and this is the oil that was vaguely lined within that after pipe and therefore represents the intake of the engine. Now we can see there is that small amount of oil present, however it is significantly different and a lot less oil than you'd expect from a direct crankcase ventilation system straight back into the intake. So there we have it guys, the testing is complete. We can see there that the Provent 200 unit is very effective at removing that oil vapor from the crankcase ventilation gases. Now before we go, I just want to talk about some of the myths associated with catch cans. And the first one, probably the biggest one, is that if you block your EGR or your exhaust gas recirculation system, you don't need to fit an oil catch can. Now firstly, let's quickly go over what an exhaust gas recirculation system is. As the name would suggest, this system removes some of the exhaust gases and places it back into the intake of the vehicle, allowing it to be put back into the engine and then combust again. Now the reason we do this is again simply emissions. We're trying to grab some of that exhaust gas, put it back into the intake and therefore reduce the amount of fresh air and the amount of fuel that is burnt. Now there are some positives with this system as well. The first one is, for example, when you're idling, you don't need that peak power and peak torque. The engine is just running. So for example, if the EGR system grabs 50% exhaust gas and 50% oxygen, it's going to put them in the system and therefore you're going to use less fuel. However, you're also going to be keeping the engine temps a little bit lower. As the cylinders are not going to be burning at full capacity, the engine temps are going to be lower when stationary or in low acceleration circumstances. Now the EGR system is dynamic, so if you put your foot flat to the floor and accelerate at 100%, the EGR system is going to detect that you no longer, you want peak power, therefore it's going to inject 100% fresh air into the cylinder to give you that full combustion within each cylinder and therefore maximum power. Now the negative with the EGR system, and the biggest one that affects the factors with the catch can, is that you are removing exhaust gases which do contain small contaminants and dirt particles and putting that back through the intake. Now these are very, very small particles and by themselves wouldn't affect the intake system. However, like we mentioned with the crankcase ventilation system, there's oily gases that line the intercooler and then the intake system. Now at the back of the intercooler, where those two gases, the exhaust gas and the crankcase gases meet, the crankcase or the exhaust gas particles are therefore attracted to the oily particles that have then now lined your intake and can over time build up a sludge. Now with the 200 series Landcruisers, there's a lot of information about intake cleans on the forums, and that sludge is the mixture of the exhaust gas recirculation system and the crankcase ventilation system. Now, if you are looking at doing intake clean on these 200 series Landcruisers, you're looking at about $1,000 and it's a very labor intensive job. So anything we can do to reduce that sludge or prevent it from building up is going to be helpful. Now, one option is to block that EGR system and therefore have fresh air being pumped into the engine at all times. Now, this will definitely reduce or eliminate the amount of sludge buildup in that intake system, as you're not going to have dirty particles and contaminants coming from the exhaust and mixing with those oily gases. However, that sludge or the build-up on the intake system there is just one of the reasons we fit the catch can. And the second reason is to remove those oily vapors to therefore maintain maximum heat transfer properties through the intercooler. Having oil lining the intercooler is going to reduce the efficiency of the intercooler, as demonstrated in my intercooler cleaning video, and therefore even if you have blocked the EGR, a catch can is still going to provide a benefit. Now, another myth that floats around the forums is that these units are going to provide unnecessary back pressure on the crankcase ventilation system, therefore reducing its effectiveness and potentially causing lower engine damage. If these units malfunction, there is going to be a buildup of pressure. However, there are systems in place to avoid any engine damage. A system like the Provent 200 unit here comes with a pressure relief valve, which means if anything were to go wrong and the pressure does build up within the unit, it will release those gases out into the environment and into the engine bay. Now, this will create a mess within the engine bay. However, at least it's better than causing that back pressure and maybe preventing any of that lower engine damage. This is another big consideration as to why it's important to buy a reliable unit from a reputable company to make sure it has some of these features like the pressure relief valve to potentially avoid any damage. So what we've ascertained from the testing today is that these catch cans are not 100% effective in removing all of the oil vapor that passes through that crankcase ventilation system. However, what we have proved is that the Provent 200 unit is extremely effective and efficient in reducing the majority of them. So this brings us to the biggest question. Is it really worth fitting an oil catch can to your turbo diesel four-wheel drive, or is it a bit of a marketing scam? Now look, having these oily gases pass through your catch can and into your intake is not going to cause any engine damage. However, fitting a unit like the Provent 200 one here, it is going to significantly reduce the amount of oil that will line your pipes, your intercooler and your intake. So what this means is that the intercooler is going to retain a maximum efficiency in regards to its heat transfer properties for a lot longer period of time, and therefore prolong the serviced cleans required on the intercooler. This will also be the same for the intake system, where it combines with the EGR gases. Although there still will be a very slow buildup of that sludge and a restriction within the intake when mixed with those EGR contaminants, it is going to prolong the service intervals required for an intake clean on these 200 series, which is extremely expensive. As discussed earlier, even if you are looking at blocking the EGR, you're still going to be catching a lot of those oil vapors in that catch can prior to entering your intercooler, and again, maximizing the efficiency of that cooler. So in my opinion, yes, an oil catch can is worth fitting. They're quite a cheap item, this one here costing just under 400 Australian dollars, and it's a very, very easy item to fit yourself at home. So guys, I hope this video has provided a bit of an insight as to how the oil catch can works, a bit of testing there on the Provent 200 unit, and my review and thoughts over the last few thousand kilometers. Now, like I've mentioned throughout the video, I have made several videos in relation to previous catch cans, the reasons for switching to a Provent, and intercooler cleans. And I'll link all those videos in the description below if you are interested in seeing some of the results from that. Now look, if you have any questions or queries about anything we've spoken about in today's video, hit us up on our Facebook page at Exploring Oz, and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer any questions you may have. Otherwise guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.